did it today.
by accident.
Yeah. I was jumping around on the pier, holding
'Cause
on to a
nobody's
rope.
jumping in that water right now.
Where?
He said, "Oh, now you can jump in the water." When
That's where everybody's wimping out.
did it break up north of Highland?
Oh,
Did it break up
no, I
north of
meant
Highland?
sarcastic about it being.
Yeah, it's, well, North of Highland, I don't know.
Said he had to leave early, but he's ready.
No, it's probably enough.
We have a quorum anyway. Good evening. Welcome to the audience. How are you out there? Let's have a roll call. This is the Water Utility Commission meeting.
Commissioner Strelchuk,
Here.
Commissioner Bushy is not here. Commissioner Meyer,
Here.
Commissioner Worth,
Here.
Commissioner Garrell is not here. Commissioner Brian Schneider,
Here.
Commissioner Kathleen Schneider,
Here.
and Commissioner Nervin is not here. And Commissioner Apple.
I am here. We have a quorum. First item is the approval of meeting minutes of November 13.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Next item is authorization of water meter purchases. Self-explanatory. Do you need an explanation from staff?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any questions? Call the roll.
Commissioner Strelchuk,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Worth,
Aye.
Commissioner Brian Schneider,
Aye.
Commissioner Kathleen Schneider,
Here. Aye.
Commissioner Avondra.
Aye. 6-0, and that's adopted. The next item is budget transfer for water meter replacement labor.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? Any questions? Call the roll.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Worth,
Aye.
Commissioner Brian Schneider,
Aye.
Commissioner Kathleen Schneider,
Aye.
Commissioner Avondra,
Aye.
Commissioner Strelchuk.
Aye.
6-0, and that is adopted.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Can we go home now?
Should all meetings should be that fast. We will now call to order the meeting of the Sewer Utility District Commission and have a roll call.
Commissioner Strelchuk,
Here.
Commissioner Bushy is not here. Commissioner Meyer,
Here.
Commissioner Worth,
Here.
Commissioner Garrell is not here. Commissioner Brian Schneider,
Here.
Commissioner Kathleen Schneider,
Here.
Commissioner Nervin is not here, and Commissioner Avondra.
Here. We have a quorum. First item is approval of minutes, December 11.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion?
Somebody seconded it.
Is there a second?
There was
Yeah, okay. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. I'm supposed to turn this off.
Casey. Juicy.
How to do that, okay. Next item is resolutions. We have one, Resolution 3608, authorizing the city to enter into an intergovernmental cooperation agreement with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District to recognize joint total maximum daily load requirements.
Move approval.
Second.
Second. A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Questions?
I have a question about it. It seems a little nebulous to me in spite of all the information that we received on this. Because if you look on page 13L, it says, it doesn't supersede our independent obligation to pay our respective contribution for the diminution of pollutants. And it doesn't really specify how this is beneficial to us, meaning we're going to be able to take credit for other communities' contributions to this joint effort. Is that accurate?
Yes, so unfortunately, because the city's new MS4 permit has not been issued, it is unclear, frankly, in terms of how it will benefit us. The idea is that by taking a watershed-based approach instead of a municipal-based approach, that we can all work together to sooner delist the Milwaukee River, which ultimately is the goal, and would therefore lift the restrictions that we're under as it relates to TMDLs. So the idea is by entering into this agreement, the city can take credit for MMSD projects as it relates to what will be our permit limitations for TMDLs.
That would seem to benefit
It is,
us.
Okay, yeah, it seems like it should, it doesn't really specify much about how it's gonna work. And this last section that's saying we're still obligated, under number L there on page 13, it says nothing in this agreement replaces or supersedes our independent obligation to reduce their respective contribution and improve the watershed, so are we still obligated separately to do?
yes, I mean, through our MSF4 permit, we will be obligated by our own defined
got it.
limits to meet certain requirements. And so what they're saying is this doesn't get us out of having to adhere to those requirements.
Okay.
But what somebody else does may help us
Uh,
to meet those
yeah.
requirements.
Okay.
But if we're ahead of the game and have exceeded what we're supposed to do, which is unlikely because probably nobody will be, we don't lose anything from this. And I also note that we can terminate the agreement at any time, so
We
I
can,
don't see risk.
yes, we can terminate the agreement at any time, and there's neither any cost to us for participating, nor frankly, is there a cost benefit of us not participating. I mean, we don't get a break, so to
No,
speak.
I was more wondering, if we have
We-
10 times more credits than we
Yeah.
need to under the thing, do we lose any of that for the future?
So two
If
things.
they take 'em?
Number one, in anticipation of the new permit being released, and thanks to a grant that the city had obtained, we did update our modeling as it relates to TMDLs, and we are not compliant. So we are not necessarily at risk right now of exceeding that. However, there is also talk at the DNR level of the possibility at some point of doing what they call nutrient loading credits, much like the wetland mitigation bank credits that some may recall from the past, that if there are communities that exceed their requirements, that they could essentially sell those credits to other municipalities that are not meeting their requirements, that may come at a cost that is less than implementing the actual requirements to meet that. Obviously, again, without our updated MS4, we don't know exactly how that will work, but I do not anticipate that we will start our next permit cycle by exceeding the requirements.
Anything else? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Information items. Update on private property inflow and infiltration and sewer lateral rehabilitation.
All right, thank you. So staff intended to provide an update as we move closer to closing out this project. Quality assurance and quality control exams were completed following floodwater testing that was performed by MMSD, where MMSD requested the participants of this voluntary municipal program to have another step of basically running hoses over these laterals to see if there's groundwater entering into these laterals to monitor the effectiveness of the lateral lining. So those exams were performed, and additional quality assurance and quality control exams were completed after that. That was just on a select few, not the entire 40 laterals or homes that participated in the program. So what we're looking to do is go back to the property owners and ask for additional permission to access their cleanouts and do exams from the houses back to the lateral. There were some exams done from the main to check for the lining condition. So what we're looking to do is install tags on these cleanouts with the permission of the property owners. There's a new kind of tag where rather than it being on the outside in the basement, it would actually be when you open up the cap, you might be able to find it on like if a plumber were to come in the future, they would know that they shouldn't be grinding the liner that was installed like a Roto-Rooter, so that there's a cap on the inside, there's a tag, so that the property owners are aware of that, or the plumber rather is aware of that. So that's one of the follow-up action items. So we have a 3-year warranty period on the contract, so this is part of closing that out, is getting those exams. So another couple things are the participation was 40 out of 45 eligible, so it was about a 90% participation. That was one of the criteria in the original policy, and nearly 4,700 feet of laterals were lined to reduce the inflow and infiltration. Another item was that the surveys were transmitted to all the participants, and overall, property owners responded with satisfaction. There were a couple responses. We got about a little less than 10 responses. Then a couple made a comment that they wish communication were to be improved on the next project. So, but overall, having a 90% participation rate is pretty good compared to some of the percentages across the rest of the MMSD. So that was the update, and I can entertain any questions.
Alderman Meyer?
When we initiated this, we researched out customers in a certain area that we could pretty much, scope the lateral and check out if there's any problems with it and they were going to line it after that, correct?
Right.
So there's no mention to them at the point, at that time, that there would be additional testing and additional burden on the homeowner, correct? And I don't mean burden financially, I just mean that there'd be more stuff happening with the laterals and that.
Right. Asking permission for this follow-up wasn't specified, other than in the policy that at the end of the 3-year warranty period, there would be an exam to close out the
So they were informed of
Contract.
that? Or they were not informed of that?
informed of,
That there would be a closeout inspection of that
they,
over the 2 years?
property owners were informed of that.
And it wasn't something that MMSD just said, okay, now we're going to do this, on top of the scoping out of the lateral,
Well, MMSD,
or the watering on top to check for
yes,
filtration?
so that was a voluntary effort that MMSD had as a follow-up to this project. So that was something that we had discussed with MMSD. Staff had discussed that with MMSD.
What I'm getting at is just the fact that if we get volunteers, to do this and do that, maybe that's the reason why the customer had said, or the resident had said, there should be more communication, because now instead of what we initially told them was going to be happening, now we have some other layers of stuff on top of it, whether it's not onerous to the resident or not, but it's something that they weren't made aware of, and it could possibly be somebody didn't want to do that if they knew there had to be some continual thing along the line inside of that. So hopefully in the future that, since we do have this kind of history now with it, that if we go on to the next phase and that we let, those residents know that this is a possibility a little stronger, so that they remember that.
Thank you. I think that makes a whole lot of sense to be able to say, I think about a quarter of the participants volunteered with the follow-up flood testing. And during this outreach for future projects, informing the property owners that there may be additional follow-up that can be implemented.
Thank you.
Kevin, in the fiscal impact, it says 1.8 million is unallocated. Is that money that's available to the city of Mequon to continue this?
Yes.
And we have plans to do so?
Their preliminary ideas,
Okay. That's a
and
plan.
we're looking at closing this project, wrapping it up and moving forward, with, reaching out to, a consultant, multiple consultants for requests for proposals to, help put together a report in identifying, priority areas. And there's been communication with MMSD on the timing, so we can work that process into the schedule before this 10-year allocation is scheduled to sunset. So there's a 10-year time period from 2010 to 2020. So what we're trying to do is move forward with closing out this project and identifying additional projects with this RFP. And then we'll be bringing that back to the commission for presentation on targeted areas.
Question. So if the funds sunset in 2020, we just have to have the projects identified and the funds allocated to those projects before that sunsets, or do we have to have them all completed? Some of these flavors of money are different, so.
Right, that's a good question, and that's been a question that's been brought up at the MMSD Technical Advisory Team meetings. It's a monthly meeting with the different municipalities with, and the indication of the program manager at MMSD is that there's be a grace period as the sunsets. So they feel that there may be some negative feedback if money were to be withdrawn. So they're looking at how a sunset period would be enforced. So what the agreement has been to this point is to try to get the funds allocated with approved work plans. So to answer your question more directly, the implementation does not need to be done prior to 2020. The goal would be to identify those projects and get work plans approved by the city's sewer utility commission, so that work plan can be transmitted down to the MMSD, because they also need to approve that commission needs to approve it as well.
Sounds like we better just get cracking.
So short story, the goal is to have the report that comes from the consultant plan out the rest of our money. And that way we can all hopefully agree to the program so that MMSD can approve the work plan, and then we just have to march through the contracts.
Sounds good. Yeah, sounds good. Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Alchek.
Sounds like the terms of the sunsetter have been mostly verbal. I guess what I'd request that you do immediately is get it in writing, so that we're not backed
Might not
into
be.
something.
It is, and they do it by the year. They have a budget cycle just like us, so they've only budgeted for it through 2020, but the individual work plans are what our mechanism is to agree to it. Unfortunately, at some point, there's this pot of money sitting there, and if we don't spend it, they'll give it to someone else.
Great. So the sunset is clearly spelled out in writing because, as you stated earlier, it was discussed in a meeting, with a bunch of the other places. I just want to make sure that, they've been clear with the city that if we have the funds allocated and projects lined up, but we haven't completed them yet, that we're not at risk of losing those funds mid-project. And I just want to make sure that we back the residents,
That's why we want to have the work plans. So
Yep.
if we can get the agreement on how to spend the money, then the work plan with MMSD is the contract or their financial obligation to complete the projects as outlined.
Okay. Just want to be clear that I thought I heard it right, but wasn't sure.
Okay, East Trunk Sewer.
All right, on to the East Trunk Sewer. It's progressing at a good pace. We're on schedule, on budget, or within budget, and we have a March 31st milestone approaching to bring the relief sewer online. And we're looking to have that connection done next weekend, given this weather continues. So we have over 9,000 feet of 10,000 feet of pipe tunneled in the ground right now. We're looking at, in April, moving into the last portion of the tunneling in Stone Creek Drive. There's still work to do. And we're going to be moving on with restoration this spring. There'll be major restoration efforts throughout the project. Just recently in Port Washington Road, we were able to get restoration, temporary pavement put in. There's still a lane closed at Dunges Bay. It's been closed for some time now, since around Thanksgiving. And the traffic signal's getting put up there, and we're looking to open that up next week. So the diversion structure is the major milestone that we're looking at completing next week, so that's brought online. There will be additional diversion structures that are going to be connected to the relief sewer, and as I previously indicated, the major restoration is going to begin this spring and continue through summer. If commissioners receive inquiries about the project, there's website updates. There's one that's in the packet. That's posted online with the regular updates on a weekly or monthly basis, where the activity at the beginning of the project, I was updating them on a weekly basis. Now the activities slowed down over the winter, and it'll pick back up a little bit with the restoration activities. So that's one option for reference if there's inquiries about the project, is the website. Another would be, there'll be continuous updates on the weekly bulletin. Are there questions about the East Trunk Sewer construction aspects? If not, I would pass it over to Kristen regarding the inquiry from Alderman Bushy regarding the EGA.
Which is very quick. Just to state that we would be prepared to react to any development that comes forward. So while the area north of Highland Road is not currently in the sewer service area, if there was a development that came forward, we know what the process is to otherwise petition for them to be put in the sewer service area with the completion of the East Trunk Sewer area or East Trunk Sewer project. The capacity is there, but otherwise, just as we stated at the last meeting, we're waiting on deliverables from the consultant in order to be able to have a policy discussion similar to what we're about to have, but in the opposite direction with respect to the extent and the policy discussion for how to provide the East Growth area with sanitary sewer service.
Okay, move on to discussion items, sanitary sewers service area overview.
Okay, in 2018, a resolution was approved to continue exemptions for certain parcels and to also pursue a boundary amendment. The boundary amendment process takes 6 to 9 months, and staff intends to address any changes to the sewer service area prior to the tax bills. So there were 2 resolutions that were drafted and included in this packet. One resolution, a draft resolution, was for parcels that will continue exemptions, and the other is for parcels that would be removed from the sewer service area. So the intention is to populate a parcel listing for each resolution based on this policy discussion. then bring these resolutions back to the April 9th Common Council meeting. So staff's prepared a series of memos that provided an overview, and in summary, MMSD has a rule that all parcels in the sewer service area are charged to the respective municipal sewer utility. Those parcels are charged regardless of whether or not a building is connected to the sewer or whether or not sewer is available. If the parcel's in the sewer service area, that assessed value goes into a formula, and that cost there's that obligation for the sewer utility to pay that. When those parcels are removed, then the sewer utility will not incur capital charges. When those properties are removed from the sewer service area, they will be required to use a privately owned wastewater treatment system, such as a holding tank. So staff's requesting the commission to provide direction on the implementation of various city ordinances and interpretations related to the sewer service area boundary amendment. This applies to specific parcels and to parcel groupings with various criteria. So in the discussion items on the agenda, there's item 5A. So that was the overview that I would say I just addressed here. So if we go on to the next item, 5B, there's a series of questions here.
5C.
Give a packet page if you could.
The packet page is not?
There-
5B was the okay, so the,
So we just discussed what started on page 28, is just the overview to state that because of MMSD rules, the commission at due meetings last year directed us to move forward with a public input process to initiate a sanitary sewer amendment to adjust the boundary so that the utility is no longer subject to capital charges. But before moving forward with that resolution, we're looking to go through a series of policy questions so that we can populate those two, which gets us to then the item that starts on page 30.
all right. So on page 30, what we're looking to do is get policy decisions related to the city sanitary tax and MMSD capital charges for parcels. Go ahead, sir.
So I guess my question is, and the concern that I've had from residents is as they're being removed and added, like, you want us to go into policy. What I don't want to end up with is somebody that's got well and septic or a holding tank right now that it fails, or 2 or 3 of them have failed, maybe with this flood, people on the river, that are in the sewer service area, but it's not really feasible. But if several fail in a line and they find it feasible, I just want to find out, like, and have a very clear and easily implemented pattern to allow them to add back in, maybe not make them wait a year.
We can't.
The process for the amendment to the boundary of the sewer service area requires a municipal commission approval. That commission approval then takes a minimum of 2 months to get on a quarterly regional planning commission agenda. And then that takes time to approve and process, and then there needs to be a public hearing because they have to prepare a report or an amendment memo, which needs to be returned to the commission here for adoption or ratification. So that process takes 6 to 9 months, and there isn't a way to speed that up.
So 3 people's sewer system fails and they figure out it's financially beneficial for them to add in. They're 9 months without anything, or they have to write the check and or do it twice.
That's
So again,
an outcome.
yep, to be clear, when we started this discussion a year ago, there were essentially 3 options. They can be removed from the sewer service area, which means they can no longer connect to the public sanitary sewer without a boundary amendment, or they could remain in the sewer service area and either incur capital charges even though they are not connected to the utility, or the utility could bear that capital cost and not be subsequently charged to the homeowner. So the decision at that time was to pursue the sanitary sewer amendment, but we're here tonight to make sure that after the public input process, that that's the direction that we want to go before removing them from the sewer service area.
I mean, it all sounds fine and dandy to remove them from the sewer service area if they can't get service, or, you know, it's like challenging to do so, but the last thing as a commissioner that we want to do is devalue somebody's home if they end up in a situation where they need to be added back in, or render it useless for a 9-month period of time. I mean, there's got to be,
Then we're back to the policy discussion of a year ago that the utility incurs those capital charges, and the decision is whether the property owner should pay that or whether the utility should pay that.
2 points there. There are significant parts of the city that are outside the sewer service area already that could have the very issue you're talking about. So this wouldn't be unique. And secondly, there are temporary private,
Sure, you can pump
you know,
until.
things that can be done so that somebody could bridge that 9-month gap. It's not like they'd have to move out of their house and be homeless. But there's, I mean, your point is well taken that is an issue, but it's probably less likely than for some of these people who can't get sewer realistically, but if we changed the policy that's been to date, they would end up incurring a significant charge for something they can never get.
right.
That doesn't seem fair.
Which is why we wanted to march through these decisions and discussions, so that if there are exceptions or there are different decisions to be made, that we can make those before the resolution is before you for approval to remove them from the sewer service area.
And you'll notify people and give them opportunity to reach out to us to work through it prior to the resolution coming through, or am I going to get a little reactionary
Yes,
after
but-
the fact?
Yes, but to be clear, they've already, we've had public information meetings, they've received information from us. So, yes, consequent to this meeting, we will populate, them into the appropriate resolution based on your policy decisions tonight. And then we will notify them via letter as to which of those resolutions they would be considered in, so that they can certainly reach out to us ahead of time if they have any questions, and if not, appear before you at that April 9th meeting if they want to request something differently than what you discussed tonight.
Does it have to be
There-
done April 9th?
Yes, well, yes and no. We have to be able to get through the process prior to the issuance of tax bills. Otherwise, the utility will incur those capital charges yet again. And the direction last fall was to pursue this so that the utility would not have to carry those costs for the next tax cycle.
Well, the goal is to have the utility not carry the cost, but I don't know that we as council realize the full scope of like the process of adding them back in. I mean, it all sounded really great talking to you, and then I had residents reach out there like, well, what if this fails, or what if that fails? And I was like, well, then you're out of it, you know? You're out of the sewer service area. There's nothing we can do beyond adding you back in, and that's not really a place I'm comfortable being, as a legislator. I don't want to make policy and, burden people that are paying for sewer service for people that might hook up someday that really can't. But if there's an opportunity that they can, again, like if the parcel's 200 feet, yeah, it sounds like, item one is like kind of a no-brainer.
So then let's march through those. I mean, that's the point of tonight, is to go through and make those decisions, because ultimately, that is what will happen. Either the utility will incur the costs, or they have to be removed from the sewer service area. Time won't change that. So part of the public outreach was to make sure whether or not there were people that otherwise wanted to connect, and if they were otherwise able to. That was a part of this process as well.
Before voting on all of this, I'd like to know, like, as we've removed these people, if they should choose to add back on, do we have current capacity to add them in if they choose to go?
Yes, capacity is not an issue.
And, you know, in the future, do you anticipate that to remain, you know, like a feasible opportunity for them? Like, should they add in the future? Are there any properties that are in question that there might not be capacity once they've been removed? You know, again, those are things like,
The capacity for the allocation for most of these is not an issue. It's either the feasibility of connection or the legal access to,
okay,
or the risk to the utility, for example, for properties within the floodplain.
yeah, I just had people that were concerned. I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page. And
But we do want to be clear that is the decision that is being made. That if they are removed from the sewer service area and their private system fails, that they will not be able to connect without having to go through the reverse of this process, which is to request that they be added back in and go through the process in order for them to do so.
And then where's the benchmark for the decision? Like, is it just all of these, or is it, if it's really, like you mentioned, I think, you know, one location would have needed a lift station, you know, to push from the corner for like 8 residences, and it just fiscally wouldn't be possible. It'd be like, you know,
Well, that's why we're going to march through all of these, because the answer is not universal for every single property.
right.
Alderman Urban.
I think this is necessary to clean up a bunch of inconsistent policy in the past.
Oh, I get
And it's been levied onto the public in an unfair manner, an inconsistent manner up until now. Even after this, it won't be perfect, but we're trying to make it better. There've been some parcels given an exemption to not pay that are in and have the ability to hook up someday, and the utility bear the cost of that. So everyone that has sewer service has paid for them to have the ability someday. They have paid nothing. There's others that have been paying that have no ability to hook up, and there's variations of all those. We're just trying to get it a little closer to perfection, although there are a few instances where I think we'll probably go through this list and decide that there's a few isolated instances where we're going to accept that someone can never hook up and the utility will bear it because there's no possible way we can ever service them. So I think we should just step through the 6 questions. And I think it answers almost, I think you could write a little algorithm, and based on the yes, no's, you could almost have your policy set, if I'm
Well,
correct.
and again, to be clear, that's exactly the intent of tonight, is to march through these questions. I have my trusty highlighters and the property listing here, so that as Kevin marches through the discussion, I can start to track how the parcels will go. Then we will provide the notice, and that will be populated for your decision at the April 9th meeting.
We have essentially 2 groups here, right? We have people that we can remove from the service area because they are on the boundary.
Correct.
And then there are people who cannot be removed because they are located wholly within, and in essence, they are an island within.
Correct.
So the people on the boundary, it's easy to take them out, essentially.
And it's easier technically to add them back in.
But the people that are on an island that are within are always going to be within that district. And the discussion that's going on here, there seems to be a really serious misconception about what we're talking about here. We're talking about a tax that is levied on all property value within the sewer district. It is not a charge for sewer. It has absolutely nothing to do with whether you get sewer, you're hooked up to sewer, or you ever get sewer. This goes back to the 1980s and the sewer wars and the billing process from MSD. So it's irrespective of whether you get sewer or not. The tax benefits everyone who lives within the sewer district for such things as clean water and a clean environment, and you know all the stuff MMSD does with water course improvements and stuff like that. So just by the fact that you're living within that district, you benefit. It matters not one whit if you get or ever get sewer. This is not a charge you pay for sewer. This is a tax you get from MMSD because you live in a clean environment, period. So removing people from the district because they're on the boundary, we can do that. Then we don't get charged, we don't get taxed for it. People that are on an island will always be taxed for it. And it's my feeling that they should pay that tax because they're in the district. And I think the state has a uniform taxation clause somewhere that we can't exempt, we shouldn't exempt people from a tax that is levied on them. You know, just like people who don't send their kids to the school can't ask for an exemption and be thrown out of the school district so they don't have to pay school taxes. This is a tax. This is not a sewer charge. It has nothing to do with whether you have sewer service. Just keep that in mind as we work through these.
From the tax also, they'll pay for the capital improvements, sewer mains and what have you, that MMSD,
Which provides a clean environment. And the people who aren't holding tanks, where do they dump their waste? They dump it at the sewage treatment plant.
and pay for it.
And they pay, maybe they pay for it twice, but that's the choice they made when they moved there, so. Anyway, continue on.
Okay, so there's slides as visuals to provide some additional information in addition to the packet, so we'll be going back and forth. Might have to jump around on the slides a little bit, but today, that's the map of the sewer service area, where Highland Road is approximately to the north, county line to the south, the lake to the east. And this is the exclusion map that MMSD provided in 2018. There's areas in blue or red, which I'm not sure you can see that or not, but they're on the fringe areas, and some are in floodplain, and those are the areas we're going to focus on. So the slides will have zoomed in maps for it. And this is some slides. I'll just go through it briefly of the historical area, which wasn't designed by parcel in the 70s. And then in the 90s, the parcel area changed, and the service area has been reduced over time. And then the hashed areas in red were added, the TDR property, and then the St. Mary's to the north in 2006. 2014, Section 28 was added. And now we're back to where we are today. So when we're
Those
looking,
maps in our packet, when this comes back to us in April, please? They weren't here, I don't think, were they? I mean, they're somewhat informative. And I hadn't seen the first couple before.
so just another slide on the resolutions. 3506 was introduced in March 2018, and Resolution 3558 September of 2018, and that was approved. Which, again, in summary, we've already talked about this, about properties being subject to all capital charges for the 2018 sanitary tax. So we'll go through, again, the septic mound or holding tank may be the only reasonable feasible alternative once they're, if they are removed because their proximity to the nearest sewer. So looking at the questions, there's number one. You were
Yeah, that map doesn't go with the number one.
no, the first question on the map is if a parcel is within 200 feet of a public sewer, should it remain within the sewer service area? On this map, that's a zoomed in location of Caredale Lane. And there's a gray line to the west, to the east rather, and then a gray line to the north. So those are the existing sewers. And these parcels, the sewer is in proximity, but it's not immediately available to those parcels. I'm going to jump ahead to another slide, so I'm making sure that I'm on the 200, this first question here. Bear
Is
with
that
me.
an island? Caredale Lane an island?
We'll skip, that one's not related to this question. So the first question is because ordinance, or, I'm sorry, Code Section 58600E states construction of residential or business structures located on a lot within 200 feet of a city sewer line requires connection to the sewer line if legally possible and practical. So our first question is whether or not those within 200 feet should be required to connect. But according to your list, that only applies to these.
So this is along Freistadt Road, where Wauwatosa Road is on the west. So I'll zoom into another map here. Ridge Road and Sunset Road, we had surveys that were sent out along with the public information meeting, where the responses from the property owners were they were okay with the privately owned wastewater treatment system predominantly. And then there's parcels along the Freistadt Road, which were within 200 feet of the sewer. So that's the basis of this question on whether or not those parcels should be removed because of their proximity to sewer.
What number is that in our,
Number one on page 33.
okay.
So here, I'll try to toggle back and forth. So those are the parcels that are allowed for exclusion because they're on the fringe of the sanitary sewer service area. But you can see the gray line with the circles as representing the sewer and the sewer manholes. So there are a number of parcels on Freistadt that are connected to sewer. And there's a potential to have one neighbor on one side connected to sewer and another neighbor on the other side not connected to sewer, while there's a main in the road. So those parcels are within 200 feet of being able to connect to sewer, but they are allowed for exclusion. The property owners indicated that they were okay with not incurring future charges and being removed from the sewer service area, should these parcels be removed.
So fast forward to the next map. I think your question is, if we go through with that, and say if you're within 200 feet, you'd keep the darker green parcels and everyone else would get excluded?
Correct.
That's the question, is whether or not,
That's the effect of the question we're being
Yes.
asked. It's like ink blots. What does this mean?
You're going to have a irregular boundary line.
because they're on the
They're on the
border, that's
fringe.
what, we have the same thing in some other, in central growth and things like that. It is more common on a boundary for that to happen, but they are allowed by MMSD rules for exclusion or for removal from the sewer service area.
Just from a policy discussion perspective, this is different than some of the other properties in that historically, wasn't it that nobody had to hook up to sewer? They had an option to,
Well,
unless of new construction, but
yeah,
existing properties.
our,
That's water.
that's water. The sanitary
I
is
thought it was
very
sewer also.
clear that we can require connection.
Okay.
We historically have not, but we have the ability to.
But the point is, these
Once
are
sewer is
all,
available, which in this case, sewer
these are all
is available.
properties where it's feasible, available. Isn't that different somewhat than,
That's why we're marching through these separately. So the first question is just whether those within 200 feet should stay in the sewer service area. Yes, sir.
Should they stay in and also be
No,
required to hook up?
that's not the question yet. Right now, the question is just whether or not they should stay in the sewer service area.
Yes. I gotcha.
And a point of clarification is, this is a public sewer in the public right-of-way.
Unlike the
Looking
next
for-
question
are you
that we're
looking
gonna
for a
have.
decision
The
from
legal
this?
and feasible part isn't a barrier
Correct.
in this
Yes.
instance.
That,
and have any of these properties been excluded to date?
Well, let me have another point of clarification for consistency. When we talk about being allowed for exclusion, that's a term that MMSD has used for parcels that are along the fringe. That
I'm
can,
talking about excluded by us.
an exemption, can I suggest using the word an exemption?
Okay.
From the city's sanitary
Exemption
tax.
to these parcels to date.
These parcels, well, I'll have to check the list on that. I don't have all of the parcels memorized on which ones were exempted. If they're,
But
they're,
yes,
they have to be because,
yeah, they did not get charges. They were some of the ones that were recoded and put back in, and then subsequently we took back out. So they are not getting city charges, but
Was
they
that
have
just
been
last year,
encouraging
or was that historically before?
historically.
Okay.
If we're going to exempt them from the capital charges and they're able to be removed from the sewer service area, then that's what we should do, because then we don't have to pay that bill.
Right, and that's the question we're asking, is whether they should be removed from the sewer service area.
They should either not be exempted, or they should be removed from the service area. That's my opinion. We shouldn't be paying someone else's tax for them, sorry. So,
And you tell us, this is the first question, after we have some discussion, would it be easier if we just pose the question?
what's the
I think
question?
the answer to one
But-
is yes.
These people
I
should
don't
be
know, maybe
removed.
someone else feels different.
I mean,
They want to be removed,
Yes.
they should be removed because we don't want to pay their tax bill.
sewer district, we don't want to pay for them to be in the sewer district.
Then we
That's-
have a conflict with
Why
our own
would we wanna
code that
pay
says
their
if you're
tax
within 200 feet, you should hook up.
If
And
you're
they
in the
wanna
sewer
be
district,
removed.
But if they want to
And
know
This
the
is like
sewer
a
district.
giant ball of twine we're trying to unravel. So,
And it's twisted.
Yeah.
Yes.
and wet.
Okay,
Should we have a vote?
I think that would help us. So the question as it relates to whether or not properties within 200 feet of the sewer should be required to connect result in the potential removal of the properties at 7322, 7230, 7116 Freistadt, and 12031 Ridge Road from being removed from the sewer service area. So what we are currently asking is whether those 4 properties should be removed from the sewer service area. Yes means it should be removed. No means it should not be removed. We will secondarily address the capital charges if the consensus is that they should remain in the sewer
Question
service area.
is, should
We're
it
gonna
remain
remove
within
all
the
the-
sewer service area? So yes means they stay in, no means they leave. I think you said just the opposite. Or maybe I didn't hear it right.
I can ask it either way.
Well, I'm just asking it as written. On
The-
question one,
So if the parcel is within 200 feet, it should remain within the SSA. So, yes, if we ask it that, I was getting specific to the parcels, but yes, if we ask it as written,
but that doesn't
Then
mean
a
we
yes
require them to
vote.
hook up, it's just they'll continue to pay the charges.
well, that policy decision actually isn't under discussion tonight, and if it is, we need to bring back to you a different report, because there are plenty of other properties in the city that are within 200 feet that are not connected. They're just not being considered for removal from the sewer service area. So
and
if
they're
we're gonna
paying.
make the policy
But they're
decision.
paying the tax.
Correct.
Okay,
Well,
I
that's
think
why I'm saying but the first question is whether they should be removed from the sewer service area, because if they are, then they're not paying the tax.
And none of these properties get sewer, correct? None of the shaded properties?
They don't have.
Are
to.
connected,
Are connected,
correct.
yes.
None of them are connected. Okay, so we're posing the question as written, which is, if a parcel is within 200 feet of a public sewer, should it remain in the sewer service area? A
These
yes
parcels?
answer means it will remain in the sewer service area. A no answer means it will be excluded, and it pertains to the properties of 7322, 7230, and 7116 Freistadt, and 12031 Ridge Road.
And does this question just pertain to those 4 parcels?
Yes.
Okay, I would move that they be removed, along with all the yellow ones behind them.
Okay, but right now, just those 4.
Yeah. Well,
So the motion is for those 4 to be removed.
Second it.
Okay.
and they want to be out?
Yeah, what's the Greens' desire?
Do they
That-
want,
The green is, they're within 200 feet.
but do they
Within
want
200
to,
feet,
do
but
they
do
want
they
to be
prefer
out
or?
of the
I'm,
Okay.
I'm looking, oh, that one I don't have.
Think
You have.
You want to be in and you're willing to pay the tax, or you want to be out because you don't want to pay it. There's no middle ground where I want to be in but not pay it. And this one, anyway.
These parcels, 7322, they submitted a survey that said yes
To be removed.
to be removed. What's the next one?
7230.
7116 was a yes to be removed.
Maps in what we reviewed.
Where's the other one on Freistadt? I thought they
Security list.
all were.
Oh, I was, this is a new map.
Yeah, it's in there.
7230 is a yes. And 12031, is that the one that abstained? 12031 abstained.
So they didn't well,
Okay.
How come this map wasn't in our packet?
These maps are not in the packet.
Okay.
The,
The ones we were gonna discuss tonight were the things we reviewed in
I
our,
think he's
Back.
asking why weren't they in the packet? Because it
Yeah.
would have made it easier to understand going into the
Yeah,
meeting.
I- studied the ones we got.
All right, we're just making a recommendation here anyway, but, you understand the question?
So the motion was to remove them from the sewer service area.
Right.
And none of them said they wanted to stay within the area, right?
Correct. Three confirmed they wanted removal and one abstained.
And 7404 is staying in?
7404 indicated they prefer to.
7404 isn't in this
prefer-
list.
It is
They're
not
not
in this
within
list.
200 feet.
Let's vote.
Yes.
All right, everyone in favor of removing them, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed to removing them? Okay, you got an answer.
All right.
That should make it fall.
Okay.
Next question.
So the next relates to the same ordinance requirement, but it discusses the, I'm sorry, I was confused. The next one is as it relates to those parcels within the floodplain.
Should I read the question?
So why the differentiation?
Because from a utility perspective, we are not necessarily interested in having floodplain properties connect to the utility.
We're not interested? We can't do it?
They can be excluded by MMSD, but they are currently in the sewer service area, so they could be served, and then every time they flood, all of that inflow would go into our sanitary
So
sewer system.
MMSD would allow them to be excluded
Correct,
because they're in the floodplain? And they
Correct.
don't want the I&I
correct.
associated with it.
So
Seems
we
like a
can
no-brainer.
make the same decision by having them removed, that then they subsequently wouldn't connect.
And Director Lundin, for clarification purposes, the 7 properties that we're talking about under this policy, question number 2, are listed on the top of packet page 35, correct?
Correct. So that would be 9957, 9941, 9937, 9917 River Road, and then 12750, 12740, and 12736 Shoreland Parkway.
So this would pertain to 7 properties.
Correct.
And can you answer the same questions? Did any of these 7 properties express a desire to stay in the district?
The one property at the southern end of this map here, 9861 River Road, was in the resolution that was approved, and the surveys went out to those property owners in the resolution. So those properties within 200 feet of the existing sewer did not receive the surveys about the exclusion.
So the answer is we didn't ask these people.
That's correct.
Okay.
But, and to be clear, subsequent to this meeting, they will receive a letter so that if they do object, they can register that before the April 9th meeting.
And this is advisory tonight anyhow, because we're going to address this all in
Yeah,
April 9th.
correct. The resolutions are really just before you for review. We're not even asking you to ask on them, or, excuse me, act on them. We will just use the policy discussion tonight to populate those 2 resolutions, which will be for you first for a commission meeting on the 9th, and then subsequently for action that same night at council.
Alderman Solchek?
Were residents that, on all these properties in question here, were they sent out letters about this meeting tonight?
Not about this meeting, no. We are relaying to you the public information that was collected from them at their meeting for your discussion tonight.
I would move that these properties be, the shoreland or floodplain properties be removed from the sewer district area.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Go,
Quick question. Aren't these properties that would be in the floodplain or partial floodplain, aren't they more susceptible to their septic tank, I mean, or their, not the tank, but I mean their septic fields failing because of that, being in that floodplain area?
well, it depends on what kind of system they have, whether they
Well,
have.
the holding tank, obviously not, but I mean, if
Right.
they have,
So whether they have septic mound or a holding tank, it also depends on the individual parcel, whether the entirety of the parcel is in the floodplain or whether they have a portion of upland. And as we all know, floodplain is based on modeling, and so there may be portions of the property that are dry enough that they can remain somewhat resistant in a flood event.
but this is also including properties that are entirely inside the floodplain.
It does include some properties, yes, that are entirely
Well,
within.
unless they have a holding tank, they would be maybe or a septic tank for the failure of that higher than somebody else.
They may not be able to get their soil to perk. I mean, they may be in a location that wouldn't otherwise for a conventional system.
So, just hypothetically, if they have a septic system, we're excluding them and they're failing, or they could fail because of the fact that they're totally in a floodplain.
I had a stroke for a minute, this bright light came on.
Is that prudent for us to do that, the ones that are entirely inside of a floodplain?
Well, it should be noted, a number of them also don't have current access to sanitary sewer. If you look, as Kevin mentioned, the gray, or to me, it's a little bit blue line, either way, is the actual sanitary sewer. So the majority of the parcels, except for that one right there, don't currently have access to sanitary sewer.
So what you're saying is that only these parcels here really apply to that question? Or are there others inside the city that are going to?
There's those parcels, and then there's the shoreland. So on page 35 of the packet,
No, I know that both of those are shoreline and this, but those are the only ones that,
Those are the only ones that are a part of this question right now that we're asking.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second to remove floodplain properties from the sewer service district. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
5-1 recommended that they be removed,
6-1.
5-1.
right?
6.
6 to 1.
6-1.
He gets to vote.
There's 7 of you.
Commissioner.
Oh, we started with
You're-
6, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
6-1, we recommend.
It's going to go back to 6 because, as we discussed, I need to
Yes.
excuse myself and catch a plane.
Oh,
Sorry.
Fly away. Have fun. All right.
question 3.
Okay, next question.
Question 3. If a parcel is within 200 feet of a public sewer but does not currently have legal access to the sewer, should it remain within the sewer service area? That is the question, where the city may not be able to provide legal access, and that could potentially require the property owner to negotiate an easement with another private property owner to obtain legal access.
And they can be excluded. MMSD will allow them to be excluded.
That's correct. An example is along Freistadt Road. Let's see here. there's a number of parcels. I'm gonna zoom out.
Man, those are some bad maps.
Well, it's a zoom in from the map, so that's a bad, it is a bad graphic. Here's a better graphic. Just south of Vilda Park along, Freistedt Road. So there's a parcel here, that has a sewer, less than 200 feet from it, but it would need an easement to get through it. So it is, no, wait, that one's not allowed for exclusion. I'm sorry. This one, which one is it?
That pertains to 2930 Freistadt, according to this.
That's not just bad, isn't it?
I apologize that 2930 is not allowed for exclusion. That question should be struck. We should move on to the question number 4.
Okay.
So if a parcel is within 200 feet of a private sewer and does not currently have legal access to the sewer, should it remain in the sewer service area? And I think based on what was discussed previously, that's understood. Let's see. So this one applies to 4015 Highland Road and 1211 Wauwatosa Road. Let's see. So here are, that's not it. Here's one parcel along Highland Road, that is allowed for exclusion. There's a private main that extends north through here. An easement would be required. That's hard, you can't see that, but that's the record drawing of the existing sewer there, where the sanitary sewer ends here, and then the private main runs along there. So that parcel is within 200 feet of a sewer, but it's a private sewer and an easement would be required. So the question is, if a parcel is within 200 feet of a private sewer and does not currently have legal access, should it remain within the sewer service area?
And this can be excluded because it's on the boundary.
That's correct.
Blow that up to something other than 55%? Thanks. Now I can actually see it.
Can we actually, before the next meeting, get maps associated with the individual questions that show the parcels for the individual questions?
Well, the intent would be, again, with your decisions, that then we can create a map that would have the parcels one of two colors, either removed from the sewer service area or exempted, if that's the
Would it be easier to understand the questions too? But
By far. I mean, you're asking us to make decisions to come back with a resolution or an ordinance, and then you're showing us all these maps on the spot. I mean, it's just.
But the decision is whether or not they should require to connect if they don't have legal access.
well, it
That's
does.
the question, but that's not whether or not we have a map.
Right, but
True,
on
you
number
don't
4,
have a map, but the question is still whether parcels that don't have legal access should be, or should remain in the sewer service area.
well, maybe then could we have a discussion about why this is an issue? And I'm assuming that, these people are going to have a difficult or very expensive time
Yes,
finding a way to get their sanitary sewer to get to that private easement, and the only alternative the city could offer is through some sort of eminent domain process, which is expensive and unlikely to ever happen.
eminent domain, though, can only apply if there is access to public sewer. We can't require,
right.
we
This
can't
is
use
private.
eminent domain to require connection to a private sewer.
So here you couldn't even do it.
Yeah.
So I'd move that if these are along the perimeter of the city and that these can't get to a private sanitary sewer, that we exclude them. As a general policy, I mean, I'd like to see the actual properties and understand what the property owner's positions are, but it makes sense from a general policy to exclude them.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? 6-0, that question is answered. Next question.
Next question is number 5. If a property remains within the sewer service area, should it be subject to MMSD capital charges?
So these relate to those that cannot be removed by MMSD rules.
Well, my answer is yes.
Yes.
Any further any discussion?
Is that a motion?
I could make that a motion. What's the question again? If they,
If it's an island property that,
5.
Question 5.
that
Yeah,
cannot
I'm
be
not-
removed,
I'm looking
So
at
to
the,
be subject to MMSD capital charges.
Right, and it
Well, we're on
relates,
5.
this question relates to 5116 Caredell Lane, which there's public sewer available in Mequon Century Acres, and there's an existing easement available. The property owners are on both sides, are connected to the sewer. So if I go back here, this is the exclusion map with this one island. However, there is a public sewer available, and an easement is already in place. So the question again is, if this property remains within the sewer service area, should it be subject to MMSD capital charges?
How and when before last year did these get excluded? Because I do remember discussions 10 years ago, and it didn't seem like anything like this ever got excluded.
So MMSD provided a map based on the city's request of parcels that they had on record that were already excluded.
Excuse me, I shouldn't use the term excluded, that they,
We're exempt.
where they were,
The city exempted the
Exempted,
tax
exempted.
charges.
yes.
Exempted from the charge.
Yeah, I mean, this can't be, this isn't excluded because it can't be, right?
right.
So the
It should-
question is exempted.
This should
And I'm
not be
wondering how it
exempted.
ever got exempted in the first place. Because there, it doesn't seem to meet the criteria that was used a decade ago, and that was you couldn't get sewer. Now, whether that's, the mayor doesn't agree with that criteria, but that was the criteria that was used when a resolution was passed
Well, this
10, 12 years ago.
So this parcel is shown where it's not crosshatched.
Yeah.
So MMSD is saying it can't be excluded
Right?
Right.
because it's an island. However, there are easements
Right.
that exist to a public main. And we go back to the map here, the neighboring parcels are connected.
Yeah, which,
To your point,
My
when we
point-
came forward a year ago, we couldn't chase the administration of most of the exemptions, which is why we were trying to clean all of this up.
but do we
and-
know if it was excluded before last year? Exempted. Excluded, I'm getting mixed up.
Was it
So what happened was
Exempted.
there was quite a number of parcels in the tax system with no code whatsoever.
But this particular parcel,
So there were a bunch of parcels that did not have any tax code associated with them in regards to the sanitary sewer taxes. So some are excluded or not in the sewer service area, and then there were some that were in the sewer service area. Quite a few of them had no code whatsoever. So what happened is the assessor's office put codes on based on if they were in or out. And the only thing that we had a lot of residents come forward saying, we aren't supposed to pay this. So we went through our due diligence trying to find any kind of policy showing that. And we did not see anything in regards to this, especially this, like Ridge and Sunset for sure, that didn't have those exclusions in place.
My question is, do we know for sure that at least for a number of years, not just this year, that they did not pay this?
Correct, yes.
Okay, it's weird,
Do you want to sit down?
because that wasn't,
I think that's what it said.
yeah, I don't think that's even, I remember you disagreed with the policy at the time, but I don't think
but
this
this
still
is
fit
exactly
within the
why we
policy.
went through this,
Yeah.
was because it wasn't consistent and we couldn't chase the policy discussions, which is why 1 year ago, we came up with the list
Right.
so that we could make a policy decision and move forward based upon that. So this one cannot be removed from the sewer service area, and so the question is whether,
Get sewer, just has chosen not to.
Right.
Is that
Correct.
accurate?
All right, so I would move that it not be exempted from sewer capital charges. Second? Motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous, 6-0. That question is answered.
Still want to hear from the residents in each case, but.
And I do have that answer. That resident actually said they wanted to stay in, so
Okay.
makes sense in that case.
That would have been a lot quicker.
All right, so the next question is number 6. Let's see here. I'm just going to jump to the question. If a parcel is an island and not allowed by MMSD to be excluded from the sewer service area, should the property be charged the city sanitary tax or exempted?
I understand the question.
I understand.
You know how I feel.
I think yes.
No one gets exempted.
If you're in the SSA
Only
after this
excluded.
exercise,
Pardon?
if you're in the SSA after this exercise or out, your tax is determined based on whether or not you're in or you're out.
To be clear, the reason why we separated these two is these do not have feasible access to sanitary sewer. I'm just clarifying, that's why there was the separation in the question. The first one that we just asked does have feasible access to sanitary sewer. These properties do not have feasible access to sanitary
So to be
sewer.
clear, out of the whole discussion tonight, these 4 properties with a potential cost of $1,800
Correct,
are the only ones we're addressing that couldn't get sewer
correct.
that.
And cannot
whether-
be removed from the
Right.
sewer service area.
These are the only 4 in the entire city.
That cannot be removed from the sewer service area and cannot be served.
And have
Correct.
been exempt for a decade.
Yes.
So we're deciding to
Well, they
pass
could
it.
get sewer, but it
But I
probably
changed my
costs
mind.
a couple $1 million.
Wow. Anything's possible.
Make a motion.
I'd make a motion to exclude them because they cannot get sewer service.
Exempt them.
Yeah, can we just,
Exempt them.
we're using the word exempt, because that's what's under our power.
Exempt.
Thank you.
You did. I did. Sorry.
Second.
Motion and a second to exempt these 4 properties. That's not really the question, though, is it? But that's what it applies to. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. I voted for it. So it's unanimous. That question is answered.
Okay, thank you.
It's only 4 properties.
So we worked through those 6 questions. Thank you for your patience
We'll
with
bill District
going
4
through those details.
The extra charge.
So moving on to packet page 36 for policy discussions related to specific parcel groupings. Fortunately, this packet does have maps included with it, and there are corresponding slides that go along with it as well. So the first question that's posed here is a part of a series of 3 questions. And that is, should the properties along the east side of Lakeshore Drive be removed from the sewer service area? And I'll go to a map that, in addition to what's in the packet, where this is the area that is allowed for exclusion from the sewer service area by MMSD, and that's an area in blue. There are a number of parcels that MMSD's records were not up to date, so those were actually connected. 12526, 12504 were connected, and 12531 are connected by force mains. So those are not actually allowed for exclusion because they're connected with private force mains. So that's part of this effort, is to clean this up, clean up the record. So there's another parcel on the west side. That's a different question. So what we're looking at now is the question for these parcels on the east side of Lakeshore Drive.
they chose to be
Oh.
excluded?
The summary of being allowed for exclusion had mixed results, or people abstained.
Well, but assume abstain means they don't care. Assume, at least for purposes of discussion today. What'd the rest do?
So there's two that want it.
I'm trying to figure out where those two are again.
There are two, I'm sorry, it is on the
Overhead
map
to the-
there of
On
the
the slide.
two in red are the ones that prefer to stay in the sewer service area. The green or yellow, depending on your eyes, are the ones that were, okay with being removed from the sewer service area and maintaining private systems. And then the white ones of the highlighted properties, so to speak, are the ones that
Are they paying capital charges now?
did not respond.
No.
So when you ask them if they want to be in the sewer service area, you should ask them if they want to pay the capital charges.
We did. The
Okay.
form was very clear
Okay.
that the result of remaining in the sewer service area was that they would be required, or that they, at your discretion, they would be required to continue to, or to pay.
There was one individual that objected to the form, indicating he did want to remain in, but he had just replaced his holding tank a month prior to receiving the form. So he had indicated his response would have been different if it would have been a month earlier.
The property directly to the west of what you're showing, which is on a different slide.
Yep.
It doesn't impact what happens with these?
We're not saying it doesn't. We were just trying, for the sake of marching through some of this discussion, to ask the question individually, but depending on the answer to those three questions, it could impact whether some of these are able to remain in or not.
And sewer is where?
To the south at 12420 is as far north as it goes.
There's a sewer along Dandelion Lane, and then there's a manhole, I think it's about 300 feet to the north. So here's another visual of it.
Can they be served by gravity?
The gravity portion is not feasible north of this manhole there, because at about this point, there's a low point. So there's just not enough cover for a gravity sewer there. There is a gravity main, but it's on the you have to go under the freeway and the railroad to get to Port Washington Road at Dorothy Place, which would require an easement, and that was part of this other discussion on doing that.
I would move that they be excluded.
Meaning we would remove them from the sewer service area?
Exactly.
you.
Yes. Is there a second?
Second?
Second. Discussion. Don't talk too much, Brad. Okay.
One question. So if we had a couple of properties, and I hate to just exclude or add properties, and if we had two of them that say they wanted to stay inside of it, can we, it has to be all the parcels, it just can't be a certain,
All or nothing.
and is that what MSD says, or is that us?
It's the fringe parcels and the island parcels. Look, that's kind of what's been established, and you can't create an island.
Well, you could do all of them north of the one you wanted to keep, correct?
Correct.
Because they're
Yes.
outside of it. Can you show us back again to that yes/no map? So you could exclude 12-720, 12-730, and 12-750 without excluding the rest. Because they're on the edge.
Yeah,
Then you make other
yes,
people,
again, it's
other
something-
other
To do
people
it, I'm just saying
unhappy, and there's
Yeah.
no way to serve them.
Again, depending on how you answer these next three questions, those all depend on what would happen holistically, because it is bordered to the south by the sewer service area and bordered to the north by the sewer service area. But depending on how your decisions go here, may impact how those three fit together. We just were trying to simplify the conversation as we march through, and then once we get through those three, we can revisit whether there's a consequence on MMSD's rules.
Call the question.
All those in favor of removing them, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0, that question is answered.
All right, thank you.
Seven,
I'm gonna run for
yes,
judge.
we're back to 6-0.
All right, page 38 of the packet has question number 2. Should the properties along the west side of Lake Shore Drive, south of Concordia's property, be removed from the sewer service area? There's another aerial view of it. So that's the Concordia property, and then it's these parcels to the south of the Concordia property are the ones in question.
Have you subsequently heard from the property owner that you had not heard from at the time you did the memo?
I have not, no.
What did they vote? They want out?
That you heard from.
They want out?
We don't know.
The property owner of 12501, he wasn't definitive one way or the other.
But it says consolidating a number of parcels along the west side, and I remember it's not just what's shown as 12501, is it?
Yeah, they
no.
came through Planning Commission, which
Right.
GIS hasn't subsequently updated to consolidate a number of those parcels into a,
Do we know, but how many's the number? Is it 2, 3, 4, 5, 7?
7, I think.
Okay. So there's
So-
only 2 owners here? In that whole
3.
block?
3, I think.
There's three owners. So 12501, 12531. However, 12531 is connected with a private force main.
2, 5, 3.
They won't
Okay.
be removed.
Right. And then 12547 is this longer parcel here. So 12501 is all of those 3 parcels to the south and those other 3 parcels to the north.
So we haven't heard from anybody that could be removed, right? We just don't
Well,
know.
definitively.
I didn't get a survey response, so it was abstained.
I would move that we exclude them from the sewer service area.
Second.
Any question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, 6-0, that question is answered.
Question number 3 on page 39. Should the Southern Concordia-owned property be removed from the sewer service area?
What did Concordia say?
I had a discussion with the facilities maintenance manager at Concordia, and he was running it through his staff there, and I did not get a definitive response, but they did indicate that they probably would prefer to remain in.
How long ago? I mean, it's a big parcel of property to not have at least an idea what they want to do. And it does, the other properties kind of piggyback on this, or at least they all interrelate to some degree. How long ago did you ask him?
It was only 2 weeks ago. It was a short period of time. This parcel wasn't in the original resolution, but it was in the MMSD exclusion map.
Where is it showing that is it the blue line?
So the
Number 7.
blue parcels are
713
shown as
on this.
allowed for exclusion.
But it does have sewer running.
I wonder if we can just table this one, because they have not had very much time to consider what their viewpoint is on it. And it's a big parcel, maybe we'd like to give them some time to figure out their point of view.
You know what the zoning is on that property?
R.
RR?
Oh, I don't know the
Mill Road.
number. I don't know the number. I
But
was
I think
gonna
that's-
try and guess, and then I,
Table this one, but the properties just south of it also kind of have, I mean, we just voted on them, but there's 3 owners, we haven't heard back from them,
now,
and they kind of all seem to
But maybe
Remember
we'll
your
hear
dis-
if they're on
your
a-
decision
a
tonight is
subsequent
non-
resolution, we'll hear, we can change it.
right, your decision tonight is non-binding. We're just using it to populate the 2 resolutions. Again, our intent is to inform the property owners as to which of the lists they will be added to for consideration in April. So I might request that you indicate which of the 2 you'd prefer for them to be populated on, and we'll continue the outreach so they understand the consequence.
Okay, motion, ma'am.
I'll move that we exclude this property from the sewer service area.
Second.
Thank you.
Everybody else is looking around.
Yeah.
well, I don't know that we have enough information.
It's not binding, so it doesn't really
I
matter.
know,
Policy direction.
we're putting it out there.
I think we're just gonna
Certainly,
do
there
it.
are people that live across the street that would agree with me, and perhaps there are people working for the university that would disagree with me.
Well, I think what we'll do is
And-
once they get,
And please recall, just so everybody knows, that if in the end the decision is that they are removed from the sewer service area, at the time that Concordia contemplates developing that parcel, or if they sell it to anyone else that contemplates developing that parcel, and sewer service is required, there is a process afforded to them to otherwise be added back in. Obviously, the concern right now is that if it remains in, the capital charges associated with them and how those should subsequently be addressed.
since this is non-binding, I hope that you are going to let them know that?
Yes.
That it's not binding?
Well, the cover letter will introduce how you intend to consider them in April, so
And
that they
they-
will know.
Been exempt, I hope I'm using the right word, to date? Not excluded, but exempt.
I hesitate to
We can
confirm that, or to say anything without confirming it.
Again, I can't imagine why they would have been, but maybe based on the other, so.
We have a motion and a second to exclude them. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0, that's a question is answered.
Question number
But-
4 on page
Just
40.
one point.
Oh,
It does say in our notes, though, that Concordia has indicated a preference to stay in the SSA.
That
Is
was,
that not true?
that was based on a discussion, so we didn't get a survey response back.
We have an
Oh,
actual
okay.
form that we
Okay.
wanted them to fill out and sign.
Okay.
So they gave you a verbal but no form, and we just voted on it.
They can let us know.
All right. This is horrible.
Deputy Director Driscoll, maybe you can just refer to the maps in the packets for items 4, 5, and 6. They seem to indicate the preference of the survey results as we walk through these next 3 items.
Okay. Number 4, should the properties along Caredale Lane be removed from the sewer service area?
Excluded? Should they be excluded?
Removed from the sewer service area,
Excluded.
yes.
Yep, they are allowed for exclusion by MMSD.
I would move that they be excluded.
Nobody gets sewer.
We have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
That's what they just said.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? 5-0, that question is answered. Question 5, Bear Road.
Yeah, so on question 4, just a point of clarification, the vote was for excluding the properties?
Yes.
and that's considered equivalent as removing the properties from the sewer service area? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Just,
Yes,
okay, thank you. So.
we're
num-
shrinking.
Yes.
Yes.
Number 5, should the properties along Bear Road be removed from the sewer service area? The packet page 41 shows the corresponding map.
I would move that those properties be excluded from the sewer service area.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? 6-0. That question is answered.
So, last question, number 6. Should the properties along Dunges Bay Road be removed from the sewer service area? The map shows the survey responses, where they all responded yes, that they're willing to be removed.
I would move that they be excluded from the sewer service area.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0. That question is answered.
Okay, thank you. Staff will bring back the updated listings for the 2 resolutions that follow on the agenda. A resolution to continue exemption for certain parcels from the city sanitary tax, and the resolution to remove certain parcels from the city of Mequon sanitary sewer service area.
And again, to be clear, we will follow up with letters to all of the property owners indicating which of those 2 resolutions their properties are slated for, so that they both have the opportunity to talk to us ahead of the meeting and the opportunity to attend that meeting should they decide to register objection or otherwise make a request. We will also provide those updated drafts as an update to the Friday bulletin so that you can all see how they parceled out, no pun intended, I guess, in terms of those 2 resolutions. And then we also heard that the subsequent packet for April will include not only that information, but the subsequent maps to show how the parcels will be affected.
Within 2 weeks. 3 weeks. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are now adjourned. We'll now convene as a special committee of the whole. Have a roll call.
Do you need this?
Alderman Strelchak,
Here.
Alderman Bushy is absent, Alderman Meyer,
Here.
Alderman Worth,
Here.
Garrell is absent, Alderman Brian Schneider.
Here.
Alderman Kathleen Schneider,
Here.
Alderman Nurbin is absent, Mayor Abendroth.
Here. We have a quorum, and we have one item, community-wide survey.
Alrighty, thanks everyone for letting me get situated. Let's quick kick off the PowerPoint. I'll be brief as possible. The city's in process, as all of you know, for completing its 4th community-wide survey. And the process for this current survey started back in April of 2018. And since then, there was a point in which it came to the committee of a whole in the process to get concurrence that the council was all interested in completing another survey. And subsequently following that, there's award of a contract to Strategic Research Institute, or SRI for short, at St. Norbert College to help us with the survey. Since then, the Public Welfare Committee has been charged with really working with the consultants to help develop a final survey instrument. Just like any meeting, everyone's always welcome to attend, and we had 2 special outreaches from me to welcome council members to attend the Public Welfare Committee sessions for work style stop meetings to talk survey instrument development off camera. Tonight, we're kind of here to look at the instrument that we have pretty much almost finalized at this point and gather last feedback before we move forward. Just a little bit about the survey overall. There's about 30 questions, or exactly 30 questions divided between 8 sections. The first section talks about demographics, just so we know who our respondents are. The second dives into development from residential, non-residential, and light industrial in various sections and the whole city. The third section of the survey is looks at open space preservation, the amount of land we have preserved, and what our residents feel about that amount. It also looks at cluster lots and transfer development rights. Section 4 looks at economic development tools and how we use those tools to gather feedback on that front. The 5th section dives into community services, city services, just to see how we're doing the quality of services across about a dozen answer options to see how we're doing based off respondent feedback. The 6th section dives into the civic campus, about the amenities within the civic campus that help people travel in and around the campus itself. The 7th section dives into the community pool, no pun intended there, and how our community uses the pool and where they'd like to see it go in the future. Then last but not least is a section on parks and pathways and those amenities that the Parks and Open Space Committee and the Bikeway Commission would like surveyed, and talks a little bit about funding for those as well. So that's kind of survey as a whole, and just so everyone knows, following steps after we finalize the instrument is it would be mailed in mid-April, or excuse me, a postcard primer would be mailed in mid-April. Then the survey would be mailed following thereafter. SRI and their partner Neighborhood Analytics subcontractor that works with SRI would do the analysis, and at some point in August or September they'd be back in front of the Common Council to present the findings of the survey and answer questions and all that kind of fun stuff. So our hope is tonight is we could discuss the survey itself and see if any has any specific feedback.
Perhaps we should go through section by section, so we don't jump all over the place?
Well,
Okay, Alderman Meyer.
one of the things I just want to say ahead of time is that, Public Welfare took this up not at a request from anybody, but as something that we have done in the past through X amount of years, and have done this so that we know the direction that we're going, know what direction the city wants us to head into our residents, and so we do this on a regular basis for that. During the process, and it showed there, we had a number of meetings over it, and Common Council was invited to those, and they all were. I think when we originally took this up, everybody was invited from the get-go to be part of this and to do that. One of the things that is a little different about this survey this year is that we did have some requests from a couple other committees to be able to have some of their questions put inside of the survey, and years past that wasn't able to do that. This year we were able to add those questions inside their form, so that's a nice addition this year to be able to do that for it. So we have gone through this extensively, and I think we can go through it section by section, we can go through it by line, but maybe we can just open it up for if you want to go through section, I guess that's great. I guess it's okay to do it, but we have gone through this pretty extensively, and there were just some slight changes that we did at the end, and maybe Jesse can go through those, so we got those, and then if you want to go through it section by section, if there's any questions on it, then, but I have to preface that was that any major changes we make tonight inside of it, it's going to get past our deadlines or anything, that we do have a deadline for doing this, getting this in, and it would incur cost to us.
Correct. Since the packet went out, staff was working on our end as well to keep refining the instrument, and we were able to gather feedback to update a few points. So what I have up on the screen is the clean version of the survey that's in your packet, and I've redlined it with a few points in particular. There's most of them are stylistic or language changes. There's one change that was more substantive, that's more of correcting an error from staff's end and trying to pull everything together in a short period of time. So if you want, I'm happy to walk through those, or just yield.
To be clear,
Yeah.
I think if we're going to go through it point by point, then we ought to do it on there, because what you're saying is you have a draft that's somewhat different than what's in front of us.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so do any aldermen have any comments on the survey?
Well, let's go through it.
Is that what we're going to go through?
Pardon?
Are we going through that?
Okay, section 1. Does anybody have a comment on this section 1, which is demographics?
But we got to look up there, not here,
Why?
because there's some differences.
changes.
Looks good.
Well, this is,
So
this
demographics,
is the redlined version, but not.
This is
in red.
another redlined version, right?
correct, off the clean version that's in your packet. The demographics section has no changes from what was in your packet. So that includes questions 1 through 5. Those are the first 4. The 5th question goes on to the next page, which just asks residents to try to identify which aldermanic district they live in.
Section 2.
Alrighty. Section 2 dives into development in the city. There's an introduction that has not changed since what was published in the packet. And then I did not open the right version, I'm sorry.
What's different here is instead of single-family homes that says on 1 acre lots, it says 1 house per acre, 1 house per 2 to 5 acre, whatever that was.
There you go. And look at that, it's blue, not red. So these are the changes just for readability. It says 1 house per acre instead of 1 house acre lots, just a little simpler.
Well, it's also a different concept. One would require 1
So
acre
this
lots.
is what
the
it
other-
says? This is what the survey will say instead of
Yes.
what's on our.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what we had discussed at the Public Welfare Committee, just didn't make it there. Now, whether people wanted to say something different, that's a different issue.
Comments? The only question I would have would be on question 7.
Yes.
Where you support anywhere, you support only at the intersection of Port and Highland. But the intersection of Port and Pioneer actually has a freeway interchange, so.
That should be Highland, that should say Pioneer, not Island. That's new, and,
Oh, really?
yeah, that should have been Pioneer Road.
Should have been Pioneer.
That answers that question.
Good
Nice
catch. See, we didn't have that for us, I don't think, last time. Maybe we did and we missed it.
Open space.
That should
Too
have been
far.
I can't read that fast.
Sorry, I was trying to find where it went.
Trying to skim it. It's not happening.
I'll edit it afterwards. This will be Pioneer Road.
Don't forget.
I promise I
I
won't.
don't want to see a bunch of people coming back on Port Washington Road and PR.
Yeah, it's on YouTube, so I'll follow up later.
Okay, section 3, open space preservation.
All right, this is the intro is what I did edit. There was an error on our end, trying to pull it together. What went out in the packet said we had a total of 5.6 square miles of open space, and that was an overestimation. The actual estimation is between 4 and 5, so we're safe. There's a window, and the new language would say that it's comprised of open space with about 1/3 being city and county parks and nature preserves. We're trying a little bit too detailed before.
City has or city owns,
The city has. We don't own county parks,
right?
so that's correct up there.
Okay, moving on. Section 4, economic development.
Now, hold on, you did make the same changes on the 1 acre lots on both 9 and 11, or whatever the other, all 3 sections, correct?
Yes, sir.
See, there, 9 and 10, thank you. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, economic development. Questions?
So the 4 main's a little off due to the track changes, but they all fit nicely on in the final version. The questions and answers won't be spliced.
We're not gonna buy any more blighted sites. Okay.
Well, it just got added to the one before it.
Yep, just simplifying.
Any questions? All right, section 5.
All right, satisfaction city services.
I noticed there's nothing in there about city hall or administration. You don't wanna know?
Well,
Well, there's all the departments, but there's no city hall or administration. And I know
building
the last
itself,
time-
you don't.
Huh?
The building, you don't mean city hall, the building, you mean city hall administration.
Yeah, like, what would you call it?
Mayor/administration. Administration.
Administration. The last time we had one that said elected officials, although it came in last, so you might not want to add that one.
Oh, we have elections for that, but we could add that. Nobody,
We already know where we rank.
Yeah.
I don't know.
administration, does that make sense?
Does it make sense?
Or do you want to put it down something like visiting city hall or something that nature to, I think that's what you're trying to get to, isn't it?
Is that a service, though?
Yeah.
Is that something that people, I don't mind asking the question, but are we asking it the right way?
How about interaction with city hall?
Maybe
Oh.
finance and administration, because we don't have finance up there either, and there is some degree of overlap.
I don't know if people know what that means.
People pay their taxes and their sewer bills.
Yeah, finance, I think they might, or the
We know
city,
what that means.
city treasurer. That's what people think of as, I mean, I think you go to the treasurer.
Well, the
back with rave reviews.
City hall
People love that.
counter staff, they do a good job. We don't.
People love them. They're gonna get
But
They'll give firing us a run
we
for
just
their
put it down
money.
as
I'm betting they like the police pretty much too, but we're still asking the
Yeah,
question.
police and fire and,
But,
We know
counter
we-
staff might be a good answer. That still doesn't get to what Dan was bringing up, and that's, do they think the city is run well?
finance administration.
Well, I might do finance, or city treasurer, and I might do counter staff. But it still doesn't get to
Well, if you put down
administration.
I'm sorry, if you put down city hall administrative, if you put that down that way,
Okay,
Sorry, so that was city hall administrative.
yeah.
administration,
And like in parentheses, administrative.
well, administration, I think, just to be,
Yeah, you know what we're looking for.
yeah.
We know, but will the people
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what the response is.
Will it prompt an answer?
majority don't know?
Okay, anything else? Moving on to section 6, civic campus.
In the wording before number 20, talking about a tax increase, whether whatever would be developed at that intersection would fall within the TID district, and we would have money available within the TID that wouldn't automatically create a tax increase.
I think we only have 2.5 million in that.
We would have approximately over 12 million to be borrowed, I believe, after we gave that last increase to Foxtown that changed. So I believe there's money in there for public expenditures, for improvements within the TID, so it wouldn't necessarily come out of a tax increase.
So I guess I wrote the language in the intro. The reason I said could is because we don't know the exact range of either potential
Take it out.
project. So it could be all TIF, or it could be a little bit of both, or.
We'll take it out, just either project will cost several million dollars. It's, you're not
Okay.
determining how you're gonna pay for it, you're asking whether they want it, and letting know it's expensive, and maybe
I
good.
guess I have a problem with that question because it's awfully, it's a lot of speculation. We don't know if either one of those things is remotely possible, much less what it would cost. We don't own any of the land. It's underneath a power line next to a railroad track, goes under a state highway with underground utilities, so the feasibility of it
Isn't known.
is
We
really,
could-
really out there.
Replace that and say it might not be possible,
Um,
or might not be feasible.
and, yeah,
Here's the reason why I
and the
don't mind.
cost, if you put that on the TIF, you're more than doubling the size of the TIF without a revenue stream to pay for it. The bike path doesn't contribute any revenue, so. But I think the bigger question is this something that's even possible to do? We don't know.
I think it's more than possible. I think, many cities have undertaken these types of, projects, all around. And
Oh, yeah.
there's also gonna be, obviously, there's a lot of infrastructure that has to be done, but there is grant money available for things like this as well. It's not just necessarily gonna come from one source or one thing. So,
I think it'd be better to ask a more generic question. Would you, approve of, would you like to see improvements to the interurban trail crossing at Mequon Road? I'm sure we'd have to do a study to see what's most effective. But like I said, we don't own the land, it's under a power line. Does We Energies, would they even entertain the thought of either one of
well,
those?
the Bike and Pedestrian Commission has been asked this and been looking at that question for a long time, whether it would be a bridge or an underpass,
Who has the bike?
bike and pedestrian.
Did they
And
talk?
again, that's a board that, was chosen to do this of, representatives of the city and residents, and, sometimes you're not gonna get these people that necessarily wanna serve if you don't, try to do some of the things that they recommend. And this is something that's coming from them that they've been looking at for a while. It's not something new to them.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I think the question is germane because, we do have that issue at the railroad tracks for interurban. Crossing over there, it is kind of a bad situation. And this is just one option that is to be presented out over for it. And I think the fact of us putting inside there that I'd be against the question if it just didn't have a cost down there or just had nothing inside there, said you'd be in favor, because that's like going inside of a cookie jar and going inside a candy store and everybody going, yeah, I'll take that, and not knowing what the costs are.
We have no idea what the cost is.
Absolutely,
Right.
but we're kind of laying, some of these things also, we're laying it out a little bit that it could cost $7 million, and if you took out, it could result in a tax increase, and put down, either project could cost several million dollars, and the exact project cost will depend upon the scope of the new construction and site conditions and feasibility.
That would be fair.
I think that would then answer the question of,
I would take out, will cost several million dollars, though.
it's going to be that.
Oh, I'd leave that in.
Yeah, it's going to be that.
Or it could be tens of millions of
There would
dollars.
never be tens
Absolutely.
of millions of dollars.
That's more than several.
Yeah, we do.
Well, how about if we take out the word several and put in millions? Because we do know it's more than $1 million.
It's gonna be several.
Yeah. Well, but what does several mean? Is that
Millions of
Three, is
It
that
seems
five?
the
Is
Highland
that
Road
seven?
interchange went from 9 million to 22 million in a couple of years, and now it's probably at 35 million. So,
You would be hard pressed to find any of these, whether they're located wherever in the country, that cost typically more than $6 million. So, I mean, and that's a high.
Yeah, but I just don't know if 6 is several. Several, I think it was 3.
Okay,
You know, so I just think millions, and we're
that's fine.
leaving that possibility.
Okay.
Will cost millions of dollars, and the exact project cost will depend. Just- Okay. You just continue on
Oh,
On
I got you
feasibility,
now,
right?
sorry.
from the sentence below, yeah.
You have that, Justin?
Yep, we're good.
The exact, depending on
So
the
is
scope of the structure,
feasibility
site
getting in there,
conditions.
Justin?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Feasibility, the concept of it may
Depend
not
upon
be
the scope
feasible.
of the new,
That's what Dale said, right?
so the new structure, site conditions, and feasibility.
Okay,
Okay. I can't type it fast, but we got it.
okay.
Structure, comma, feasibility.
Yeah, so comma, take out the word and add the word and feasibility at the end. So after structure, comma. No, put a comma there, because it's a conjoined sentence. Comma, and. Depend on the scope of the new structure, comma. Take out
Oops.
and then add and feasibility at the end. That's what you said, right?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Feasibility. Oops,
Anything else?
I haven't closed.
All right, parks and pathways.
Oh, we got the pool section, if you wanted to go through that too.
Pardon?
Section 7 before parks.
Oh, did we skip over?
6?
Oh, yeah, 7.
7, community pool.
Pool.
Any comments on that?
Are there any changes up there?
Just verbiage changes here to question 22. The way it was worded before, it made it kind of almost seem like this decision was made, but it's not.
When? I mean, that could be next month or.
We've got two uses of the word consider in that sentence. Maybe we exchange one for explore. Considering the city may have to explore.
Probably even better.
That'll read better.
We don't necessarily have to close it, we might have to fix it.
Well, the engineering
Fix
staff
or
told,
close.
the engineering staff said they probably at some point can't be fixed, and that's
Can't
why.
be fixed, yeah.
I think they said that the last time, too.
Well, we'll have to explore it. We didn't say we're gonna close it. I mean, that's the, you know. But sure not in the near future, not tomorrow.
You know, it's funny because of
Section 8.
this survey, we probably got more questions about the pool than we do about development side of this thing.
It's a hot topic. Families.
Any questions on section 8?
Section 8.
I wanted to know who added
Under-
pickleball courts.
For your question 27,
Where's the park?
that's park improvements. I mean, I've had people ask for a dog park, and that's not in the east side of Mequon, like another dog park?
Oh, west side dog park.
Yeah, west, central, north, an additional dog park in the city?
You merged pickleball and tennis courts? I mean, if you're trying to keep it in, that's a question, that wasn't a suggestion.
Oh yeah, I can do that.
Well, I know you can. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Similar,
Yeah,
not,
well, you might,
Definitely
if
different.
you're gonna do one, you might do the other, so it just is a thought, but capitalize the C in courts on pickle,
say
or take it
pickleball
down
or
on tennis.
I think those are convertible, too. I mean, you can,
Yeah, so. And then you don't need to do this now, but if you're gonna do another dog park thing, it ought to be next to the other dog park one,
Absolutely.
just from a logical organization.
The off-road bike path along West Dodgers Bay Road. Are you determining that as mountain biking or off-road paved bike path?
I think that's a sidewalk bike path.
So add the word paved. Before bike.
Off-road paved bike path along West Dodgers Bay Road.
Which questions came right from the Parks Department?
Pickleball one, I think, came from them,
Any other questions on section 8?
the small dog at Catholic Kearney.
Flush toilets in all
And
parks.
updating, I think, came.
I mean, you know, you've asked about Lemke. You know,
That was, then we didn't, that came from the park board. That was like one of their priorities. I mean, most of this.
Correct.
The paved, pavement bathroom facilities are, or the permanent
Lemke
bathroom
Park,
facilities
yeah.
at Lemke. He's asking what about other parks? Most of this came from the park board, so we might as well start with their priorities.
And that's because they're doing the master plan for
Right.
Lemke, and it's,
Correct.
Other parks
And it's
have
heavily
bathrooms.
used for sports.
I'd move approval and that we send the survey out with the changes as indicated.
second.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Move to adjourn.
6-0, that question is answered.
Sorry.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Good job, guys.
And thanks for everybody that showed up at